Hi, so I'm going to be looking at a criticism of the Dore programme. I'm going to go through it line by line and just give my own observations and thoughts as we go. And I've kind of picked this one because it is fairly representative of the criticisms that I have seen about the Dore programme. So this one is on the Mental Health Watch website, which was created by Dr. Stephen Barrett. So this bit here, Dore treatment criticised, again written by Stephen Barrett, MD. So there's a little introduction about what the Dore programme is, about who Winford Dore is, why he created it. That's pretty neutral. I'm sorry, this is the screen is actually bothering my eyes a bit, so it might be a bit choppy. So it says the programme cost about $3,500. And it says in 2007, so I don't quite know when this was written. It might be a bit after that, it might be as far back as that, I don't know. It takes 12 to 18 months to complete, and the programme's is described as physical and mental exercise. Quote from the website, from the Dore website, that fine-tunes and hardwires those parts of your skill learning centre so that learning becomes easy and automatic, giving you optimal performances in reading, handwriting, spelling, physical coordination, attention and memory. And also the exercises were said to develop the cerebellum. So that actual description, in quotes, that does seem to me to be doable, achievable. You know, that is fairly clearly stated goals. You know, very specific goals, so you know that looks all right to me. I'm sorry, I don't really know what the cerebellum is. It's just, I know it's a part of your brain, and I know it's a part of your brain that people try and say when they're drunk at parties. That's all I know, really. But there's this thing called cerebellar developmental delay. So apparently that happens when the neural pathways which link the cerebellum... Oh, okay, so the cerebellum is your thinking brain. Oh, the cerebrum is the thinking brain, and the cerebellum. So it happens when the pathways connecting, say, those two bits, they're not quite fully developed. So in this instance, the cerebellum, it can't process the information quickly because obviously it isn't getting the information, and the development of language and decoding skills which you need for reading and writing is impaired. So I think that is where people think that dyslexia is coming from at the moment. So the Dore programme, these are specially tailored exercises, so they address the CDD by stimulating the cerebellum. So, oh right, so the pathways have to go from the cerebellum to the cerebrum, apparently. Okay, But making the cerebellum work better, that helps to remedy the symptoms of learning difficulties, and it can help all sorts of people to learn better. Well, that actually seems reasonable to me. It says they're specifically tailored exercises. So again, this all seems very specific. The goal is very clearly stated. How it's going to happen. You want one part of your brain to connect up to another part by doing exercises. I mean, I don't see why that isn't possible. I don't agree with all claims like this, but that does seem possible. So let's start there. So in 2004, oh, this is interesting. The UK Office of Communications, oh good old Ofcom, they concluded that Tonight with Trevor McDonald had improperly promoted Dore under its previous incarnation as DDAT. I think that was dyslexia, dyspraxia, something. What should we say? DDAT was dyslexia, dyspraxia, attention treatment. Yeah, we like Dore better. Dore is easier to say, but they'd improperly promoted it as a revolutionary treatment, I think he means, and a breakthrough. And the Ofcom report stated that, it's not in quotes, but I can see this is directly quoted, having consulted with leading dyslexia organisations and other practitioners in the field, the ITC, what is the ITC, is satisfied that these claims by the programme that the DAT treatment were both revolutionary and a breakthrough were not sustainable. They might actually be correct in that, but it could be on a technicality, I think. The cerebellar theory of dyslexia originated at least 30 years ago, and exercise-based regimens without the use of drugs have been available in this country and the USA prior to the establishment of DAT. All right, I've never actually heard of that. I mean, I first heard of dyslexia, I think, in the 90s. So this is from, let's say, 2007 at the latest. Just for argument's sake, it could be later. So that would make it 1977. Have I got the sums right? Yeah, okay. I'd never heard of that, and if that was the case, I'd like to know what exercises they were, so I'll have a little look at that. And I'd like to know why no one's ever heard of them before. I mean, it is possible that someone tried it and it didn't really take off, so it kind of got buried. No one ever really heard of it again. So from, you know, the Dore perspective, it was revolutionary and a breakthrough because they hadn't heard of these other exercises. So I don't know what the background is to that. The scientific community has sharply criticised Dore's theories and claims. In 2004, so that was a response to a promotional report on CBS TV's 60 Minutes. I think that's the Australian programme. So the International Dyslexia Association stated, and this is being quoted then, the method of treatment or intervention promoted by Mr. Dore, parenthesis, repetitive physical activity, balancing exercises, etc., close parenthesis, is predicated on research that has been questioned by many neuroscientists. Oh, okay. So it kind of looks like from that this theory or this idea came up before, and it was, you know, it was dismissed before it got anywhere anyway. You know, whether rightly or wrongly, I don't know, but so it looks like it never got off the ground to start with. Unfortunately, that reality was not shared with the viewing audience. Several studies from well-respected research institutions, and they say Harvard, Yale, Georgetown, etc., indicates that the dyslexic brain functions differently than the non-dyslexic brain. While there is growing acceptance that the cerebellum may play a greater role than previously thought in higher level cognitive processes, there is surely no consensus in the scientific community that an intervention for dyslexia may yet be credibly based on cerebellar theories. It is IDA's position that interventions such as Mr. Dore's are simply not supported by current knowledge. Okay. Right, so, I mean, there is no consensus in the scientific community about it, but I don't know what research has actually been done on the cerebellum and dyslexia. And someone with dyslexia, their brain will function differently than the person without the dyslexia. But whether someone with dyslexia, you know, their brain could become different and more like a non-dyslexic brain if they improve their dyslexia. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that could be possible. You know, all things being possible, what I'm saying is you can't rule it out. A more recent review by Dorothy Bishop, who is a psychology professor at Oxford University, has reached similar conclusions. Okay, so I'm assuming that this is another direct quote. Dore achievement centres are springing up worldwide with a mission to cure cerebellar developmental delay. Well, I would agree that that is correct, because that is their mission, thought to be the cause of dyslexia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, dyspraxia and Asperger's syndrome. Okay, so who thinks it's the cause of dyslexia? Is it Dore, or is it other people generally? I'm not sure about that. That's not clear in the sentence, sorry. Remarkable success is claimed for an exercise-based treatment that is designed to accelerate cerebellar development. Unfortunately, the published studies are seriously flawed. On measures where control data are available, there is no credible evidence of significant gains in literacy associated with this intervention. There are no published studies on efficacy with the clinical groups for whom the programme is advocated. It is important that family practitioners and paediatricians are aware that the claims for this expensive treatment are misleading. Okay, so I'm going to take that quote in two parts actually, because even though it is very harsh, and personally I think it is not fair, on a technicality, I think in some parts they are correct. When they say that, you know, the published studies are seriously flawed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad or incorrect, but it might mean that that the research might be missing parts which you would normally need in a research study. So on measures where control data are available, so it seems there might not be enough control data to measure, so that non-dyslexics are measured against dyslexics. It says, on measures where control data are available, there is no credible evidence of significant gains in literacy associated with this intervention. When it says no credible evidence, it could mean that how they measure gain, it might not have been possible for that. They might not have been able to have brain scans. Perhaps they were expecting brain scans. I do believe that, certainly some people did improve, and they improved very well with it. But unfortunately, I think there might not have been the methods available to them to do the measurements that would be expected, under research conditions. It doesn't mean that it's bad or incorrect or anything like that. We are talking about on a technicality here. There are no published studies on efficacy with the clinical groups for whom the programme is advocated. So when they're talking about clinical groups, they're probably expecting it to be in the Lancet or in clinical publications. I should imagine most of this publication, what they've got, is probably, on Dore's website, in Dore's own literature. It doesn't mean it's incorrect or bad. You have to be, and again, with something like this, you have to be part of the target group. And if you're not in that sort of circle, it is very, very hard to get into that group and to be accepted. You have to literally be a part of that peer group. So I think that is the problem here is, you know, there's a bit of not what you know, but it is who you know. It is important that family practitioners, this sentence here, it is important that family practitioners and paediatricians are aware that the claims made for this expensive treatment are misleading, and I think that really is a bit naughty. The treatment is expensive, yes, and I'll go into that in a bit, but to say it's misleading, that I think that isn't on, because it obviously has worked for some, and although it's the case that they may not have been able to get the research measured and published in the way they would like, that doesn't make it misleading. You know, I think there is still more work to be done, but you know, it does come across as though they're not being given, you know, the Dore has never really been given the chance to do that work, to quantify the results properly. So to then turn around and to say, well, they're misleading because of it, that really is a bit, that's just not fair play. So in May 2008, okay, Dore, they liquidated and closed the centres, and in 2009 this was taken over by Deneva Limited, that's it, which was formed by Scott Quinnell. So this is a rugby player who'd used the programme himself. I talked about that in the other Dore video I made yesterday. And in 2009, the British Advertising Standards Authority, they upheld a complaint against a Google link, which the Deneva had stated the Dore Programme, so open quotes, the Dore Programme need help with dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia or Asperger's. Okay, so I don't see what's wrong with that. In response to the complaint, the company, it did show, it did submit 2 studies purporting to show benefit, but the advertising standard, the British Advertising Standards Authority concluded that the studies were inadequate. You know, it may well have been, but I mean, there are people out there claiming to help you with everything. So I mean, I could put up a website today, you know, let me help you get in touch with your spirit guide to help you with your dyslexia. You know, it's a bit wild and out there. Sorry to anyone who, you know, who may have a spirit guide, but I can't see if I put out a website like that would get taken down. So yeah, it does seem like that the whole Dore Programme thing has got its work cut out, you know, to be able to move forward and succeed. Okay, so yes, the programmes, they are expensive. I think they're very expensive, but then again, you are talking about 12 to 18 months of treatment. They are specifically tailored by the looks of it, you know, so you're looking at work going into assessing each individual child and drawing up a programme for them, I think, and, you know, the ongoing support. and obviously there's a centre that you go to, so there's that overhead. So that kind of makes sense in itself. On the negative side of it's expensive. If a child has dyslexia, and the parents are desperate enough to ask for help, then there is a genetic component with it. So the chances of the parents having dyslexia are going to be a bit higher. So that means the chances of those parents not being able to afford fees like that because they're doing lower paid jobs, that's going to be higher. So, you know, some of the clientele are just going to be priced out of the market that way. But then again, you know, I can see that you would have costs to meet, you know, by starting up that programme. So when Winford Dore, he thought up this programme, it was in response to his own daughter. She had very bad dyslexia. So I don't know what the process was, whether he read about the brain and developed the exercises, or whether he tried a few exercises and then went on to find out more about the brain, or a bit of both. So I'm not quite sure what order that all came in. But yeah, I certainly believe he found something that worked, and that worked for other children. And I think what has happened here, because he has, you know, made the claim that he's really been shut down, basically. You know, every time he's tried to move forward, there's been this other stumbling block. And I think what happens is, with dyslexia, it's a big pie these days. There's money in it, basically. And a lot of people have got personal interests, you know, investments. So there's a lot of players, all with their fingers in this pie. And the big players, you know, they're just trying to get as much of, it's in their interest to get as much of the pie as possible. And the smaller players are being squeezed out. So it's kind of a bit like the whole Starbucks, you know, thing, where they, you know, shut down the smaller cafes so that they can take over the premium spots. Or that's what I've been told anyway. Sorry, Starbucks. So I think he is, you know, because he's a smaller player, he is in a position where he's struggling against these much larger players. On the other side, you know, I think he found something that worked. And although he has, you know, organised research and studies, I think it is still a work in progress. I don't think we know everything about dyslexia. I don't think, you know, anyone does. But if you're looking at why the cerebellum works differently, I do think, you know, it's one thing that's kind of, you're looking at some things sink, some things float. So you're kind of about there, and you want to go into the, well, why do some things sink and some things float? So you might want to look at, you know, you've got the fact that dyslexic and non-dyslexic brains are different, but you might want to look at, well, why is that? Shall we study children, you know, young children? Shall we look at primitive tribes even? You know, what changes? What's the difference between children and adults? Like, they've noticed differences in dyslexic eyes. Well, is that a normal development in our modern world, that the fovea of our eyes is slightly different? Would our foveas be a lot more regular, both sides, you know, several centuries ago, when there wasn't so much emphasis on reading, and especially with screen time, you know? But yeah, I go off at a tangent. So that was, you know, that's a very general rundown on, you know, what's gone on with the Dore treatment, what are the main criticisms, you know, about it. And, you know, this is what I personally think. If you think different, or you know different, or you've tried the Dore programme yourself, it worked for you, didn't work for you, please put your comments below. I'd really love that. Definitely like and subscribe. I'd like that as well, wouldn't we all? But yeah, so there we are.